Thank you all for being here. My name is Brittany Hernandez, and I am your host for this Lightning Talk series in partnership with Gavel, formerly Documate. I am a lawyer, a veteran, a professional no-code, low-code developer, and the founder of Chromium Academy, where we have Gavel certification courses, as well as courses in Software, Airtable, Go Full Page, and more. I'm also very privileged to be Gavel's global ambassador to law schools and the program director and senior instructor of Gavel's Law Students in Legal Tech Access to Justice Fellowship Program. I'm actually joining you live from Tallinn, Estonia, where I'll be representing Gavel at the Future Law 2023 conference tomorrow and Saturday. So if you're here, feel free to come over and say hi. Today, a lawyer and owner of Contrast Law, Alex Bainov, will be discussing the topic, Integrating Clio with Gavel, a practical dive into the everyday tech stack of a modern lawyer. Feel free to post your questions in the chat as you think of them, and Alex will pick them up once he concludes. After questions, I'm just going to do a quick wrap up, after which you're free to stay on the call for an optional 5 minutes of speed networking, where I'll invite a few people to introduce themselves for about 1 minute each. You can let me know in the chat if you'd like to introduce yourself during that portion of the call. I'd now like to introduce today's speaker. Alex is a lawyer based out of Manitoba, Canada, whose practice focuses on estate planning, estate administration, and corporate matters. Alex has a Bachelor of Commerce degree and a law degree, both from the University of Manitoba. After law school, Alex articled and practiced with a large firm for a few years, then joined a smaller firm for over 5 years. He has now been running his own solo practice for the last 5 years, and he enjoys learning about new tech products and figuring out how various apps can help improve his practice. He is a member or a volunteer with many organizations in Manitoba, particularly those relating to estate planning. It definitely makes me feel like I am underachieving for sure. So Alex immigrated to Canada at the age of 15. So he says you'll have to excuse his accent at times. We're so happy to have him here. Thank you so much for being with us today. Alex, the floor is now yours.
Well, thanks for the invite, Brittany, and thanks for everyone for joining. If my voice breaks and I stop for a water break, I apologize in advance. I have been sick for the last few days, but I didn't want to cancel, so here we are. If my voice breaks, I apologize in advance. So the topic, I guess, today is the tech stack, but really, I think the focus is the Clio integration with Gavel. So before we kind of dive into how I use that integration, I thought it might be useful to kind of just go through just the general Clio setup in terms of how I have it set up and talk about the document generation generally. So I'm going to share my screen. Brittany, maybe you can just confirm that you can actually see my screen. So do you see my Clio?
Yes, I can see it.
Awesome. Okay. So Clio has internal document automation, and I'm not sure how many people on the call actually use Clio or have that as their backend. Maybe a lot of you do, because that's why you're on this call. But if you use Clio, you probably know that it has document automation built in. Now, what they call document automation, I guess from my perspective, there's really two aspects in Clio. That's the document automation, I'll call it internally, and the Lawya integration that they have acquired some time ago now. So the internal document automation, if you look at that portion, it's essentially, you go under documents and you have an ability to create a new document from template. So that feature in Clio, if you are completely starting out, yes, it can be useful, but I look at it as really perhaps a regular mail merge on maybe a little bit more advanced than a regular mail merge, but that's what it is. I prefer another product like Gavel that I use every day, because it has more advanced features on things like conditional logic, outputting specific documents based on conditions that you're selecting without me having to think too much about it. Where if I was to go and create a document from template in here, yes, certainly I can create, pick a letter, and then I have to name it. Okay, well, what is my file number is going to be? Yes, I can certainly, similar to Gavel, create a PDF and a Word document at the same time. But let's assume I'm going to create this Word document. This processing time, similar to Gavel, it's there, but I have to go and create a document at a time. Creating sets is not as easy. Now, they do have a Lawyaw integration, and I'll be honest that I've used Lawyaw before I found Gavel, which at the time was Documate. At the time, and I haven't used it in a couple of years, so I can't speak to it to the current condition, but at the time, it wasn't as feature advanced and it couldn't do certain conditional logic and certain conditional production of documents as Gavel is able to do. And it could be that there's improvements now, but obviously once I found Gavel, I haven't looked back. So in terms of the setup, I have a couple different test matters set up so I can show you how I use it. And I'll use it on the corporate matters here as a starting point. And really a lot of my integration between Gavel and Clio is based on my use of custom fields in Clio. Now, you can certainly use any field that's connected to a matter or a contact, depending on the context. But a lot of my use actually comes on the setup that I have based on the sets of custom fields that I've designed. So as an example, if you see on your screen, this is a corporate matters file, and I have a custom field set that basically covers that corporate matter. Everything directors, who are my officers, president, secretary, who are my voting shareholders. If I scroll down, how are we sending documents to that particular client, who the accounting firm might be, who are the non-voting shareholders, and so on. If I go to a different type of matter, let's say an estate, it's a similar idea where I have a separate custom field set that basically, let's say in this case, it's for probate. And I basically have the information entered, how the name of the deceased is shown in the will, what is actually their full legal name, date of death, who the executors are, who the beneficiaries might be. And this will become relevant in a minute when I kind of maybe give you a demo of how that works. But a lot of these custom field sets, the reason it's designed that when I go through a document production, I'm essentially selecting a matter and potentially then selecting contacts for certain fields. And then Gavel goes into Clio and grabs the information without me having to enter addresses and potentially occupations and so on. So I think Brittany said that if any questions come up, feel free to throw them in the chat, but maybe we'll keep them to the end just for the sake of time in case somebody needs to leave early and has a pressure on time, and we can address those questions. It is recorded, so you can obviously watch the recording later as well if you have to leave early. So in terms of, I'm just going to pull up a document here. And before I do that, I'm just going to say that Gavel has done a tremendous job of building out their learning center. So anything that you're going to do, whether it's Clio-wise or anything else related, definitely check out their help center. Here's an article on how to integrate Clio with Gavel. Obviously, it's tells you how to set it up and so on. But any information that's there may still refer to Document, obviously, because the YouTube videos were there before the rebranding, but they have a great help center. So to pull up a document, Brittany, hopefully you guys can see the Word document now.
Yes.
Okay. So the idea being on any Word document, once you code for Clio, it's really no different than coding other documents, except that the selections you're making really depends on your workflow and what questions you're asking. So an example might be, if you look in here, this particular field is actually just strictly pulling information out of a custom field based on a file number that I've selected. And So I don't have to worry about going and selecting or typing in the full legal name of the deceased in this case. It's just because I selected that particular file, it now actually, that integration goes and grabs that name from my custom field that I showed you earlier. So that's one example. So another example is, let's say on a corporate matters, similar idea is for this particular one, I'm essentially on the Clio integration, selecting the corporation name, and I will show you an example of, and we'll run through that workflow with you. Essentially, I'm selecting the corporation name that's connected to a Clio matter, to a client, and then from there, it actually goes and looks, do I have anything in the voting shareholder to position? And if I do, well, it's going to say shareholders. If I don't, it's just going to say singular. And all of those conditions are basically based on those custom fields sitting in Clio. And I don't have to answer those questions in the workflow, only answering one question of what the corporation name is. It's going and checking those custom fields and doing all those conditions based on that. If we go to the signature block, it's the same idea where it can actually check. The way I have it coded is it's going and checking whether a specific shareholder potentially is a corporation or a trust or an individual, and it's going and grabbing their name from custom fields in Clio based on that choice. So why don't we just run through a workflow, and hopefully that will make more sense. So as an example, let's start with the corporate services matter. So let's assume I need to do an annual resolution for a client, for a corporation that I maintain for them. So it's time comes for annual resolutions for approval of financial statements and so on. So in that scenario, this is essentially my workflow. As a user, all I need to do is select the file and corporate name. Now, one thing to keep in mind, I'm just going to paste this. The one thing I suppose I should note, and that is provided in the Gavel help guide as well, is the Clio connection is really meant to be for internal builders, not necessarily an outward facing. So like a person has to be logged in order for this connection to work properly. And that is because the connection searches all the files. So if I start typing in, let's say 193 in this field, it will actually, the connection will go and look for every matter that has 193 in the name. It does not filter necessarily based on, some access restriction. So it will try and find everything that's with 193. The connection also does not limit it to only open matters. So it will find essentially every single matter that comes up. Now, and to explain this, I will show that on the estate administration file in a minute. So in here, so let's assume I have non-voting shareholders. I click continue. That's it. That's the only two answers I have. So we're going to wait here for a few seconds. And I wanted to run it as a live demo. I do have it in the data manager as well, but I wanted to show you what that looks like in the actual workflow. And I have had timeouts this morning because of our internet here. So if that happens, I apologize.
Can you go while it's loading? I was just going to say what we would expect to see. So that kind of
yeah. So essentially, here's my 5 documents, right? And I only answer 2 questions. But if I look at, let's say, the shareholders PDF here, just based on that, my conditions all got brought in on the how many shareholders I had. If I scroll down on the signature, who my directors are going to be, And these are all based on the custom fields that are being brought in from Clio that I have under that particular corporation. So, and the way it really would work for me is, let's assume throughout the year, the client advises that, this individual here stopped being a director. All I have to do is go and update Clio fields to delete that individual as a director. And I don't really have to think about anything else. On the next set of resolutions that I do, this will automatically not be there. So if we get to the signature block, you'll see that, again, I didn't select any of these things in my workflow. This is all gets brought in, whether it's an individual, whether it's a corporation that's acting as is a shareholder in the corporation, or a trust, and I have it set up that it's two trustees that have to sign. It's because all based on the custom fields, who are my shareholders? Here's my number 1, my number 2, 3 is a corporation, 4 is a trust. So the template is essentially has been set up to check for all of these, and I don't have to worry about anything else. I just have to select the correct corporation. So hopefully that makes sense. So to give you an example of what that might look like for an estate, let me go in here. In an estate, I do have more questions. And in that case, I'm going to select, let's say this. Now, in an estate, I would be going and asking for more questions, because these specific questions are actually nothing to do with Clio. It's more specific conditional things that I have in the templates. And let's assume, I'm just going to run through it, but I won't generate, because I'll show you a part that's already generated. This part where I'm selecting executors, I am connected to the Clio contacts. So in here, when I'm selecting specific individuals, this is the information that it's going to, again, pull from Clio just by me selecting the individual here. And if you look on my left-hand side, I really have, like, I'll call it 6 pages in terms of the information that I'm collecting. And see, this is what roughly the answer page, the summary page would look like. And let's assume I do have residual beneficiaries. Once you actually go through that process, by answering questions on 6 pages and having that connection, these are all the documents essentially that I have generated based on those answers. Now, in this particular scenario in the demo, like, I've selected that I have actually minors and I have multiple residual beneficiaries, but this is way faster production that I would be able to achieve directly from Clio. So, and again, all my conditional, like even file naming, right? This is pulling information out of a custom field that I have been the matter number for document generation. So it's actually, I have it coded that it's going and naming that file the way I need to. If you look at naming of the files, even last names, right? I'm telling through Gavel how I want it named. If I have an example, a minor involved, I have indicated that there's a parent for a minor, I have it set up that it's actually going to go and reflect that on any document naming, as well as on any document generation. So let me just bring up a document real quick here. So as an example, if I go and look at this document here, just by selecting that I had a minor, Hallie, and the guardian for that minor was Howard, it went and got that information from Clio in terms of the naming. So you'll see here I have it coded right now as simply being first and last name. Now, if I went and actually pulled up Howard's acknowledgement, that particular form, I have it coded with his full legal name, which is a custom field in Clio under the contact. So you have a variation. Essentially, you can go and pull whatever information you want if you're connecting a contact based on a custom field within that contact. So hopefully that makes sense. Just bear with me for a moment. So in terms of all of these information, if I look at, let's say, letter generation, just by selecting a contact on my form, my letter, I have the address, everything inserted already in the letter without having to answer any of this information or gather any of these information through the questionnaire. If I go, again, like this is for an estate, but I will go and give me a second here. Let's assume I had a corporate matter on an organizational, and I selected director, which is based on a contact connection. Just by selecting a contact, it can go and again grab all my addresses. It can, all right. It can go grab my occupation, my tax residency. This information is all based on custom fields under that particular contact. So again, I don't have to gather any of that information as part of my questionnaire. I just have to essentially connect a contact on the questionnaire, and all of this information can be brought in without you having to gather that info. Now, some of the connection, you have to be mindful what exactly you're trying to do or what field you're trying to grab. And so the reason I have this screen brought up, and it's an error, this is specifically on, let's say, estate administration. So under my custom fields, if I have a specific individual and I've selected a custom field, let's say their full legal name, and I have this missing, the set will still produce. It will just not insert. It will just be a blank under, like, in that field where I'm supposed to have full legal name from the contact. So that works. It's not a big deal. When you have a custom field, something like a date, that gets brought in as a regular string. And by the way, Gavel has some of this information definitely in their help article, so you would be able to figure it out. And so in my documents, we basically have to take the string and convert it into a date for document production. And so if I was trying to run my workflow, but this date was missing, this is where you will get an error sometimes, and you think that, you know, it will give you clues, and obviously the Gavel team can also help you narrow down where the error might be occurring, but it's the errors that will description that might give you an idea. So if you ever have an error on your Clio connection, actually go and confirm that if you're using any of the custom fields in your document production, that you actually have that information properly completed, because it might be trying to parse something and it can't find that field, and that's why it's giving you an error, where let's say on a contact custom field, it won't give you this error. It will actually just produce it without anything being there. Hopefully that makes sense. Brittany, do you want me to just show a couple more documents, or do you want me to run through a couple of workflows?
I think right now we can take a question because we're kind of coming up on time. So
yeah,
I do have a question in the chat from Laura. Hi, Laura. And she asked, how long did it take for you and your staff to get accustomed to using the integration?
So I'm a solo, so his staff is me and myself. So using the integration, like I think it's actually fairly simple. So if you are already used to doing, I'll call it basic coding and doing design of templates in Gavel, using the integration is really no more, I'll say, effort. What you get, maybe you have to get used to is, I will show you an example here really quick. So if you go into your simple variables, what you have to get used to is the Clio variables that you're going to have to code. Because my question in this particular workflow, the first one is like, what is the corporation name? So that's what comes up as. And so then under that particular starting point, you'll have a lot of different fields because it's trying to pull it from Clio connection. So you just a matter of you figuring out what exactly you're trying to pull in and in what format. But really, to me, it's not more difficult or more effort to use a Clio integration if you already know sort of how to code documents generally. And it's fairly basic from that perspective.
That's helpful. Thanks, Alex. There's one suggestion in the chat from our Corgan who says you may be able to correct for, I think he was talking, he or she was talking about the error by using Clio data as default answers directly in the questionnaire, might catch the error a little earlier before docs are generated. So quick suggestion there. So I'd have to parse that out a little bit more and think about kind of how this would all fit together. But I think this is also a good point about peer learning and how we kind of share best practices and kind of help solve for each other's problems, especially within the Slack channel. So if anyone isn't in the Slack channel already, you can join the Slack channel and kind of get access to us talking to each other and having these kinds of discussions where we're learning from each other's best practices. So Alex,
yeah, and I'm not,
go ahead.
I'm actually not sure if I fully understand that statement. So I'm in the queue, or I'll call it maybe the networking event, and I'd be glad to actually hear more what the person meant.
Yeah, definitely.
And Slack channel is awesome.
I've used it many times. So thank you so much, Alex. I'm going to go ahead and wrap us up if that's okay. And let me just go ahead and share my screen. So before we wrap up, I just want to say thank you so much to Alex for taking the time. I know it's not easy to create whole entire fake Clio matters and custom fields and so on just to show us this. So we really, really appreciate it. And going through and making sure that your client's data is protected takes a lot of time just to prepare to show us how you use it. So we really appreciate the time and effort, especially as someone who's a solo. So before we just kind of wrap up, I just wanted to let you know about a few announcements. And just from Alex, he said he's willing to connect with anyone who'd like to reach out. So if you want to connect on LinkedIn, you can find him at Alex Bainov or via the website at contrast.ca. If you found value out of this talk today, you can also leave him a review at contrastlaw.ca/reviews. From my side, I'll be hosting the live session of the Core 2 cohort for Crum Academy's Gavel certification courses I developed in partnership with our Gavel expert, Megan Sautel. We'll be kicking off Gold Week today. So we have basic, silver, and gold, as well as gold test out. So today is going to be Gold Week, and that's going to be directly after this at 10 a.m. Pacific time. You can just join us by enrolling in the gold course or enrolling in the full, which has basic, silver, and gold, and the Zoom link will be the first lesson. On the Gavel side, there's some really cool things coming up. So Gavel's been working on some big billing and storefront features coming in the next kind of month or so. So feel free to reach out to Dorna if you're interested in being kind of one of the first users. You can also now sort sessions in the data manager by clicking the arrows in the column title. So you'll see kind of, you can toggle those through. So take a look at that. And there have been some performance enhancements. So users should see quicker load times when working with CSV questions. Just a few quick reminders that if you have a feature request, you can put this on the wish list, which is taken very seriously. And you can also see what's planned or upcoming. You can book a support call if you have any questions. So for example, maybe if you get this error or you can't figure out a certain piece of logic, you can kind of just go ahead and get a Calendly, just book on Calendly, and you can have a one-to-one support call with our incredible team. Also, like I mentioned, the Slack channel is very supportive. We all are in there supporting each other, answering each other's questions, as well as the team is in there if there's anyone who's stumped. So you can also have your apps on the marketplace. So just reach out to the team if you have any questions about how to get that on there as well. So we host these lightning talks on the last Thursday of every month, except when they coincide with the holiday. The next one will take place on June 29th at 9:15 a.m. Pacific time. We'll be hearing from Max Renzato, who is the winner of the Law Students in Legal Tech Access to Justice Fellowships Hackathon competition in the category for Most Sophisticated Build. He actually was also the winner of, or tied for first, for Most Creative Marketing Campaign. So I really thought it would be interesting to hear from a recent graduate's perspective going into how he has won the hackathon competition in this particular category. And he won for his it's like copyright infringement checker app. So he's going to be discussing the topic, building legal tech products with no code solutions, empowering copyright holders through Gavel, and walking us through how he built his winning app. You can register for that in future lightning talks on our Eventbrite page. So this concludes kind of this main portion of the talk. So thank you for being here. A big thank you to Alex for sharing his insights with us. We're going to be moving on and transitioning into that optional 5 minutes of speed networking. So feel free to go if you need to, but if you'd like to stay, especially if you wanted to have a conversation a little bit more about what we just talked about, then we're going to stop the recording now and we will move on to the speed networking portion.